Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Money Matters podcast, the show where we discuss important financial topics that were never covered in med school. I'm your host, Dr. Tarang Patel. Welcome to another episode of the Dr. Money Matters podcast. I know it's been a while since my last episode, and I want to thank you for continuing to listen to this show. I've been trying to promote this podcast to more people, and I wanted to give special shout outs to the members of the Physician Dads group and the Married to Medicine Personal Finance groups who have taken the time to listen. I know these groups are not quite as large as the Mighty Physician Moms group on Facebook, so if any of you listeners are part of that group, please mention my show to the other members if you find them helpful or enjoyable. Also, happy anniversary to my wonderful wife, Sonal, for putting up with me for the past 14 years and for providing me with 3 intelligent and energetic daughters who keep us both very busy. Speaking of family, in today's episode, I talk with Tom and Kim Reardon of the High Income Parents blog. They focus on many of the financial and family issues that physicians, particularly those with young children, face, including college savings, retirement, balancing work and family, health insurance, etc. Tom is an anesthesiologist at Texas, and it seems that most anesthesiologists have time to do creative stuff, or that they happen to be a subset of medical professionals who actually enjoy pursuing other activities outside of medicine, maybe more so than their other colleagues. He and Kim have 5 children who she is brave enough to homeschool. Listen to this episode today, and we talk about some of those issues and their decision to homeschool their children and how they approach making these kind of decisions. All right, welcome to another episode of the Dr. Money Matters podcast. My guests today are Tom and Kim Reardon of HighIncomeParents.com, a website they've created blogging about issues facing high-income parents, as the name says, and specifically they talk about college savings, taxes, insurance, things like that. So I think these are topics that most of the listeners to this show will be interested in. So Tom and Kim, welcome to our show.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
So Tom, you're an anesthesiologist in San Antonio. Tell us about your background, and then Kim, talk about your background a little bit too.
Well, I grew up just north of San Antonio, up north of Austin, and Kim and I met in college, and I ended up going to medical school over in Houston, and she had another year on her degree down in San Antonio, so she joined me a year after my first year. So, and then I did all my training there in Houston, so I was there for 8 years. She was there for 7, and she grew up in San Antonio, and so having 5 kids, it was nice to have grandma and grandpa around to help with babysitting and just keep our sanity a little bit, and so we ended up over here, and so that's where we're at right now.
So Kim, you also were involved in the medical field. What was your background?
My degree's in clinical laboratory science, and I worked in the microlab at MD Anderson and Quest Diagnostics while Tom was in med school to kind of offset loans. And then as soon as he was able to moonlight, I stayed home.
Nice, yes.
By that time, we had already had 2 with 1 on the way, so it's nice to be home.
Okay. So you guys now have 5 children. You know, you started this website to address some of the issues that many physicians have, questions and things like that with regards to their income and how it pertains to issues with childcare and just, raising children. So tell me, what made you start this website?
It was a combination of just having an outlet to help some other people. I tend to have a lot of conversations with some of my colleagues about, financial matters and raising kids. And I tend to get a lot of comments about, my kids are doing this or that, and they aren't really appreciating, I guess, the financial aspect that a lot of doctors have. I mean, obviously, we're in the top % of income earners. And, I don't know if you've read The Millionaire Next Door, but he kind of talks about that phenomenon where immigrants come in and really work hard and they want to make a better life for their kids. And then their kids kind of see the fruits of that labor, and they end up becoming professionals, doctors, lawyers, engineers, things like that. And then the grandchildren or the children of their children kind of just see the good life, and they don't really see all the hard work that has gone into it. And I can definitely see how that's a cycle that gets perpetuated in our profession too. And so, that's always been a battle. Obviously, we love our kids and we want to give them everything, but at the same time, we don't want to set them up for disaster because, they just think everything's going to be handed to them. And so that was the main reason for starting the website. Is I wanted other parents that have really worked hard. They've got an education or they've started a business, got advanced degrees and delayed that gratification and worked hard. And then they want to give their kids a better life. And then the kids just kind of see it materialize without all the hard work that we put into it. So that's the main purpose, just to put a lot of those ideas on the website and how they pertain to everything, paying for college, how we show our kids about how we spend our money, insurance, even things like weddings. I got a post coming up that should pertain to that. So that's the main reason.
Right. And actually, I read that book many years ago too. And I kind of lived it because I'm an immigrant myself, but I moved here when I was young. My parents were obviously, older, worked really hard. I became a doctor. And I think I saw on your website, and I think it's so true that, as working professionals, like you mentioned, you can't take your kids to work as opposed to the immigrant who, had the child work with them, their own children work with them in a restaurant or their business. It's much more difficult for you to take your child to work. You as an anesthesiologist, obviously you can't routinely have your, children in the OR to see the work that you do. And so they don't necessarily appreciate the hard work that you've put in to get to the point that you're at. So completely agree with you there. I think it's very difficult to translate that image or to translate the amount of work that we've done to get where we're at to our children. They do enjoy the fruits of the labor, like you say, but sometimes they don't necessarily appreciate how it got there. So I think it's great that you've started this website, and I really recommend the listeners of the show to check it out and view some of the articles that you've written. So now, what are some of the issues that you guys faced financially when you were in medical school, and Kim, you were working, or early in residency, stuff like that?
We did end up having to borrow a little bit. Kim was able to get a full ride in her undergrad degree, except for the last year, so she had to borrow a little bit there. And I was able to work through college, and then my dad helped me with tuition, and so we both went to state schools. So back then, it's a lot cheaper than it is today. Even then, it was relatively cheap, and we were able to work and kind of fund our lives, and at the same time pay a little bit towards tuition, and we had some help along the way. So we were able to come out of undergrad without any debt. Once we hit med school, as you well know, it's pretty hard to work. And so the first year I borrowed enough for living expenses, and then Kim came along. I affectionately call her my sugar mama during medical school. And she was able to, provide for income, and we borrowed a little bit for just the tuition. But fortunately, we were able to come out with pretty low student loans, and we lived cheap after that once I became an attending and really tackled those student loans. And so we were able to pay those off in about a year and a half.
So now talk about just your backgrounds, in terms of finances. Have you always been it sounds like you've always been pretty good and careful with money. Has that always been the case for you and for Kim? Or
I guess from my standpoint, it wasn't really hammered home in my childhood. Mm-hmm. I guess we had kind of an understanding that you just didn't borrow, I guess, unless it was an extreme emergency. I mean, my parents had mortgages, but they weren't going out and running up credit cards or anything like that. And if I needed something, how are you going to work and pay for it? And so that happened.
Same thing with our family. I was a middle of 5 kids, and we did a lot of things together working. We mowed yards with the family. My dad worked and he was military, and my mom was home with us. And so everything we did that was extra on top, we definitely worked for together as a family. And I don't remember being in debt. I don't think I really thought much about my parents' finances growing up too much. It was something I knew I never really wanted to be in debt when we got into college. And so luckily I didn't fall into that trap.
I was just going to say, we, never wanted to go into debt, and we were always trying to pay for everything along the way. That's even to the point once I was able to start to moonlight, and made a lot more sense for me to moonlight and work weekends here and there versus her working, even a part-time job just because of the income differential. So that was our philosophy from that standpoint. But even as kids, neither of our parents really were sitting us down and having good talks about finances and what were proper strategies. And so you've probably seen on my website my not so magnificent 7 mistakes. So I obviously haven't been an expert my entire life, but I got into it and have really enjoyed it. I guess one of the things that I kind of had the misconception, and I figure a lot of young doctors might have this misconception, is once you're making that attending income and you're making a good income, then the real investments that really make a lot of money are going to be available to you, And if anything, I would almost say it's the opposite. There's people coming after you trying to get you to invest in certain topics, and they might be some of the worst investments that are out there. So you got to be really careful once you are making that attending salary.
That's so true. I think some of the biggest mistakes I've made were in the assets that people pitched after you become an attending, because you're right. They know, okay, you've got a little bit of money. You want to do something that may hit a little bit bigger than just your traditional stock market or basic real estate, stuff like that. And absolutely, that's those are some of the ones that are the toughest ones to really assess. So I always encourage people to really look and really do their due diligence before they make those kind of investments. But let's talk about this. So you do have 5 children, and Kim, you're a stay-at-home mom now. I think you on our emails you'd said you do homeschooling. Talk about
yes, we do.
Yeah, so talk about your decision to Tom mentioned just a little bit that obviously the income differential made it more obvious for him to work a few extra shifts. But talk about some of the other issues that you face with 5 kids financially. That is.
Oh, well, talk about the the decision of public versus private school and why we decided to homeschool, at least from a financial perspective.
I guess with our oldest, we actually put him in first year was in private school. And then at the end of the year, we realized that this was going to have to become a decision over, do we want to put all 5 of our kids through private school, or do we want to send them and build up a college fund? And so we decided to switch to public school for that next year and build up the college fund and our retirement fund as well. And it seemed like a better investment at the time, thinking I could make up any difference that was not covered in the public school. So we did public school for 4 years. After that, 3 of our kids attended. And then we decided to homeschool mainly because we didn't see our kids. And my reasons for staying home and not working, and pretty much all the decisions that we've faced with our children, is because of the relationships. And so I just, after sending them being gone and then doing extracurricular, I felt like I was getting them at their worst of the day, and the teachers were getting them at the best of the day, and we just didn't know them anymore. So tackled this new journey about 5 years ago.
Yes, we were figuring out, when we first moved here, we didn't know quite what the public school districts would be like. So we went ahead and put our oldest, who was in kindergarten at that time, in a private school. And that was great. But we started doing the math, and we're like, wow, do we want to save for college, retirement, or put all 5 of our kids through a private school? And so the economics of it we didn't really think were sustainable. And it turned out that we were able to move to a good neighborhood that had a good public school system. And so we put them in the public school there, and it was fine. They did a good job, like Kim said, as things got busier and the kids get involved in more activities, we just didn't feel like we got enough of them. We like raising our kids and we like messing around with them. And so she was brave enough and strong enough to pull the trigger, and I tried to support her every step of the way. And I think she's done a great job. And it's been great for our family. We've really enjoyed it. And it's just neat to see how they learn and what they're going to achieve here in the future.
Oh, that's great. Now, what age range are your kids?
Our oldest is 15. Actually, they're all about to go through a round of birthdays. So at the end of the summer, we'll have a 16-year-old, 13-year-old, 12-year-old, 10-year-old, and 7-year-old.
Yeah, that's a pretty broad range, but kudos to you for doing that. That's amazing. I think it's something that a lot of people think about because, like you said, private schools, especially once you get past one child. I mean, private schools here in Phoenix range from $15,000 to $25,000 a year. So you're talking a very nice sports car every year when you talk about multiple children in private schools. And then obviously that
same here.
Yeah. And then that takes away from college savings too. And then public schools, are kind of it just depends on the area you live. But yeah, that's great. I think it's a great thing that if you can do that and, get the education that your kids need that way. I think it's great. And like you said, you definitely get to spend more time with them. So that's obviously great for the family.
Plus, it saves a little money on vacation times being able to travel off cycle. So that's been an added perk.
That's so true. And actually, that's one of the topics I was going to just going to mention. Be traveling with kids, especially when you get past the traditional 2-parent, 2-kid family that it seems like all vacation or hotels or stuff are built for, becomes a little bit more of a challenge. So, that's good. You mentioned you can go off peak times. Have you guys gone to some interesting places with the kids, a more flexible schedule?
Yeah, definitely. We found that traveling right when everybody goes back to school in January is amazing. You get to see a lot of foreigners and elderly people on your trips. Right. We were able to do
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica in January. We've taken them to Hawaii. Actually, our ski trips, the kids all really like to ski. And those have been some of our best deals because everybody's gone back to school and they really want to fill up those resorts.
That's
true.
I've
kind of become amateur / trying to be expert travel hacker. So airline points and hotel points are definitely our friends, and we tailor our travel around that. Just like the Hawaii trip, I think we paid for only 3 of the tickets and 4 were free just based on that. So, things like that make it a lot more affordable, and we do a lot of 2-bedroom condos as opposed to multiple hotel rooms, and we can cook our own meals, and it's more comfortable. And so our kids are actually pretty good travelers at this point. Just using our relatives around the United States, we love national parks and camping and things like that. So we've hit Yellowstone 3 or 4 times, and we just did a California trip last summer. We took 2 weeks, or I guess about 16 days, and drove out towards San Francisco and then back, and hit as many national parks along the way as we could. And so, yeah, they're pretty good travelers. And again, I'm sure they feel completely spoiled, even though we're trying to do things as on the cheap as possible.
No, I think that's great. I mean, the flexibility, actually, the credit card travel points things. We just came back from a trip to Cancun with my kids, and it's kind of same thing. We've done the Southwest Companion Pass, and we try to tailor all of our trips that way. So absolutely, you got to take every trick you can in the book these days to get deals. So let's talk about you talk about college savings. Obviously, you've got 5 kids, and a couple of them are getting closer to that age. So what are your, how are you approaching college savings accounts? I mean, I'm sure you have a 529. What are your tips for our listeners about college savings?
Yeah, we definitely invest in 529s. I think as being high income earners, anything that I can do to maximize tax deferral or just not paying taxes legally, obviously, is definitely in our strategy. And so, we've been putting money away for the kids in 529s. Again, you kind of have to make choices and sacrifices here and there. Our goal is to put enough money away so that they could all attend like a state school pretty easily. I wrote another post on there called Skin in the Game, and I think we're big believers that we want them to have some, experience learning to become a real adult and get a job and things like that. I mean, obviously we're not trying to put the complete burden on them, but I'd like them to be able to work during college. Kim and I were able to do it, and I think it's pretty feasible. And so that they should be able to contribute towards at least their living expenses at that time. And we'll try to contribute towards tuition and books and fees. But at the same time, I'm a big believer in flexibility, and we've tried to put ourselves in a position where we really like where we live. I like my job. I'm not trying to retire, tomorrow or anything. If I had to work an extra year and pay, Ivy League college money to help them out because they really felt like they had a great opportunity, or they had a degree plan that was, really good for a certain school that might be a little more expensive. I think we're willing to work with them. We're not, putting a line in the sand and saying, no, you will get this much for college and that's it. Sometimes we do that with other things, but we're trying to give them every opportunity that we can, but at the same time meet our own retirement goals and just kind of see where it takes us and be flexible. And so far it's worked pretty well.
Good. Good. Sounds like it's going great. Now, so I like that concept, skin in the game, because I think that, anytime you can impart a little bit of effort, and I think that applies to anything. A lot of people talk about that in investing or healthcare, co-payments, things like that. I think that's really good. I think that's really good advice for people, because I think we as parents generally want to give our kids everything we can, but sometimes not giving them something and letting them work is probably the best thing we can do for them. Let's talk about. I think you had a really good article that I read about insurance for kids, and I know that this is something as particularly young parents face, or parents who are having young children. They get all these brochures for insurance for their kids. So talk about some of the types of things that children need, and then some of the things that maybe they don't need insurance-wise.
Yeah, it's a tough time, right, when you have this beautiful little baby in your hands and you don't want anything to do with or anything bad to happen to it. I guess as a general rule, mixing investments and insurance just tends to not be a good idea. I'm sure there's certain circumstances where it could be beneficial. I mean, if your child is a child actor or some kind of star athlete and they're producing a huge amount of income, then, you can look into these things as far as having large insurance policies on them. But for the most part, we recommend that parents get term insurance and, just buy insurance for that reason only, to insure against catastrophe. And then a lot of times you can add a rider on to your own policy for a small amount to, cover if, God forbid, the worst happened and you need to cover funeral expenses or something like that. And so that's going to work out for the vast majority of people. And thankfully, we didn't ever fall into that as far as trying to buy a whole life insurance. I have talked to some insurance agents, and they, recommend it as a savings vehicle for college. And again, if you're trying to combine insurance and investments, you're probably not going to do as well. And from a high income parent standpoint, the 529 plan is probably going to work out a lot better for you in the long run anyway. So, that's the main thing that we recommend to people. Obviously, everybody's circumstances are a little different and they might play out. But for the most part, if you can talk to your insurance agent about getting a rider for your kids that covers a small amount, you should be just fine.
Right. I agree with that. I actually fell into the trap of buying a whole life policy for my kids when they were first born, my oldest two. And I quickly then read about, the negatives and ended up canceling, lost a little bit of money, but I didn't want to, deal with that for the entirety of their life and have that be, the small, minute benefit that they were going to get from it. It didn't work out for me. But you're right. In certain very limited instances, it might be a good idea. But I think for the vast majority of our listeners, I don't think it really is a good investment. As far as medical insurance goes, one of the interesting issues that I've discussed with my colleagues is the new, access that a lot of people have to these health savings accounts. Do you use a health savings account? And as having a larger family, do you think that the issues are a little bit more challenging for you versus someone who is, maybe just two parents or two parents and one child for health savings accounts?
Well, yeah, we, our group is a pretty big group, over 200 physicians. So we have a robust human resources department and all the typical benefits that a big corporation would have, and we provide health insurance to all our employees. It's still pretty darn expensive from our standpoint, and even with a high deductible plan. And so thankfully we're all healthy, and we actually went to one of those health sharing programs, I guess about 3 years ago now. And to tell you the truth, we really haven't used it because everybody's been healthy and doing fine. But the monthly cost of that is about a sixth of what my plan would be at work. And that I did all the calculations as far as being eligible to contribute to a health savings account. And we did do that before we got on the health sharing plan. We were in a high deductible plan and did max out a health savings account every year. So we were able to do that for several years. But, after doing all the math and even the tax deductions, it being at a high tax bracket that you get from your employer paying, it still ends up being cheaper for us on a month-to-month basis. Now, I'm pretty interested to see what happens with the new healthcare legislation, especially if these health savings accounts go up to the $13,100 maximum. That might tip the scales from a tax deduction standpoint. I haven't done the calculations, but I think it was pretty close. Even with it being 1/6 of my company, it really, once you factored in all the tax deductions, and it ended up being a little bit less than a half. So it wasn't as glaring a difference, but I think the health savings accounts are great. Yeah, once you're talking about 7 people, it's not going to go as far, and I wish they would do something in there as a, per individual in a household or something like that, instead of just making it a single and married couple.
Right.
But a triple tax deferral is hard to beat, so we took advantage of it as long as we could, and if they go up, we might be taking advantage of it again.
So actually, I'm not familiar with the health sharing account. So I'll have to have, if you can, explain a little bit. Just, is that through your employer, or is that something that you do separately?
No, that's outside of our plan. Yeah, I haven't ever heard of an employer doing that. That would be interesting, but it's not tax deductible. You can't take it out pre-tax like you can with your employer health insurance plan. The reality of it is it is exposing to a lower risk pool. They're usually affiliated with religious organizations, and so there's certain stipulations like you can't do drugs or you can't smoke, things like that. And once you take those people out of the population, they tend to have less healthcare costs and they're able to charge less. And I think that's ultimately the whole idea behind it. I know there's a lot of debate amongst people whether these should be legal or whatnot, and I don't really have much say in that.
Right.
But
right.
As far as they are now, I'm just trying to
absolutely
be as intelligent with my family's money and do a good job. And they have they use a PPO network, and every doctor that we've ever gone to, from our kids' pediatricians to orthopedic surgeons to whatever, have been on that PPO plan. So access to care has been wonderful, and it's just like an insurance plan where they pre-negotiate rates, so you know what you're paying going into it, and they're very careful about not using insurance terms like premiums or deductibles. It's monthly shares and maximum share amount.
Gotcha.
But they operate very similar to insurance programs. And so, we have a monthly share amount, which is a premium basically, and we have a maximum share amount, which is a deductible. And so it really has operated exactly the same. There is some issues where if you don't get the extra, I forget what they call it. It's basically another fee that they'll max out your account at $1 million coverage unless you pay a little bit extra to go over that. So that's something you got to worry about if you're looking into that type of plan. But yeah, I mean, it definitely has some social implications that people have to look at to be eligible for. And if you're doing something outside of their social implications, then they have the ability not to cover it. And so that's a danger as well. For the most part, for us, it's been okay.
That's great. I'll have to look into that a little bit more, but yeah, that's good. So now we're talking about your website and things like that. One of the things that I think high income parents, but just parents in general, struggle with is teaching their kids about the value of money. So how are you guys? One concrete example is just, do you guys believe in giving kids allowances? How do you do that? And then just in general, kind of, how do you guys try to impart the value of money to them a little bit?
Very good point. And especially when we want to give our kids so much, it's been something that was really important to us to make sure that we stressed that our kids understood the value of money. So we have been we do an allowance system with our kids, and it's based on their age. And weekly they get $1 per year of their life. And with that comes a few understandings. For when they get the allowance, mostly as a tool for them to learn how to handle money. So once it comes, it's immediately broken down into 3 categories. They have a save, a share, and a save, a spend, and a give. I'm sorry. And it's that's a 40-40-20. And so their save, they don't get a touch till they're out of our house. It's there. They just get to watch that grow.
Right.
Their spend actually becomes their own little personal savings. So that's what they will save up for whatever they want to purchase. And then their give, they get to choose where they want to give it. And usually it ends up they end up choosing to go to our church. Our oldest has chosen a couple different charities at different times.
They have a couple of stipulations they have to meet.
Right. So we have chores that just have to be done. If they do the chores or not, that's really, one kid actually told us he didn't want an allowance because he wasn't going to do the chores. And we had explained to him, he gets the allowance as a tool no matter what. The chores will have to be done, but we're happy to keep his money. That's fine.
Right.
The chores are non-negotiable.
Gotcha. Okay.
The allowances, they have to remember to ask for this so that they don't get just so used to it coming to them. They have from Friday through Monday.
Yeah, they have 4 days a week to ask
for their allowance, just so that they always know, just so we know that they always know it's there and that they're thinking about it and how they're going to handle it. Ways that
I like that. That's good because it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't mean, they're going to ask for it, but it at least implies some sense that they're understanding what's happening as opposed to just it's going into their account. So I think that's really a good little way to do it. But,
yeah, I hope that it helps them in the future too. When, if they have done a good job at their job or whatever, or a client or a customer, and they feel like they've earned something, they need to ask for it. So hopefully it'll help. I don't know. We'll see.
Absolutely.
In about 20 years.
I was just thinking the same thing because that's something that a lot of us don't know how to do. And I think that's a really good skill. So, even if a fraction of that gets to them, I think that's a step that most people don't get. So I think that's a very good idea. So let's go a little bit further. So, you have a broad range of ages in your house, but your oldest is, a couple of years away from college, and you guys seem to have been doing pretty good with the retirement, and yet not really necessarily sacrificing your current lifestyle too much. So what are your goals in terms of retirement, and, how far down the line do you see that? Kind of a timeline, or what do you see as your life like in retirement, things like that?
Sure. We just sat down and wrote down our goals, wanting to help our kids with college, wanting to pay off our house, and wanting to have enough money to meet our expenses and do some traveling and mess around with the grandkids and things once that happens. And so based on current income and savings rate and current expenses, it looks like we should be able to get there in about another 11 years. So that'd make me 51, 52. That would also coincide with our youngest just starting college. And so I feel pretty good about that. You know, like I said before, we try to do a good job of, making our life what we want right now, that we're not, slaving away in the coal mines, waiting for that day that we retire. We're trying to make it a fun life. And I think we've done a pretty good job. We really like where we live in our community and the opportunities that we have. And so if I have to work till I'm 55, that's not the end of the world. If for some reason people start paying a lot more for anesthesia in the next 5 years and it's only 6 years, then I don't know. I could see myself still working just because we'll still have kids around the house. And, and I still wake up every day, messing with patients and taking care of them and helping them feel a little better once they're having a hard time in the OR. And if somebody makes me do that a few more years, I'm not going to object.
You guys seem to have things figured out pretty well. What are some tips that you could give younger physicians and their families just kind of starting out? Give me one tip from each of you that may help, make the difference in improving their financial lives.
I guess from my standpoint, I would say that if, delay that gratification just a little bit longer and really try to orchestrate your early life without going into too much debt. Yeah, I have partners or guys that are coming out wanting to make partner that are hitting mid to high six figures on their student loan debt. And I just can't imagine how hard it would be to get through that. You really have to live well below your means because you basically have a high mortgage coming out of that. And so it's kind of the first time that I see it's getting really difficult to pay for medical school, especially if you go into primary care or pediatrics or something like that. It's, the incomes just don't justify the cost for some of these schools. I listened to your podcast about student loan repayment, and that was amazing what dentists and veterinarians are going through. And I could see doctors, MDs and DOs going through the same thing soon. Absolutely.
I think that's, that's really good advice in general for anybody, but absolutely keep the expenses down and defer as long as you can. Kim, how about you? What is one piece of advice that you could give?
You were telling me something about how, dealing with me being away a lot in residency and things like that, and just how it was taking care of the kids at that time.
I would think my advice would probably lean to the raising of the kids and the going back and probably go towards the allowance thing. Just as far as raising fiscally responsible children is just helping them be aware that everything that they have does have a value and there was work attached to it, whether it came from the person, a gift that was given to them, or from their dad being gone for that time, or something that they've worked to earn. So just continuing to not necessarily always attach a monetary value for things, but help them respect the work that's gone into everything that they have. And so
I think that's tremendous. And one thing that I can tell by, listening to you guys is that both of you as a couple have a similar appreciation for the, the work that you both have put into raising your family, your professions, things like that, and then kind of sharing a like-minded goal. And I think that's something that before you find your significant other is something that maybe people don't think about it quite as much because it's just not an issue. But that once you are with that person, you kind of, financial goals, while they don't seem to be the most romantic thing, are something that, should be addressed early on in a relationship, just so that you kind of have set the same goals, and it makes things a little bit easier down the line. Looks like you guys are definitely heading in that path. You're right on course, and you're doing great. I mean, like you said, Tom, 51, 52, doesn't really matter. It's still a tremendous accomplishment to be able to retire and raise 5 children and pay for their education and still live a very comfortable and enjoyable lifestyle. So kudos to both of you guys for doing that. Tom, what do you guys, what do you see in the future for your website?
Well, I hope it keeps growing, and I hope I keep writing some ideas that people enjoy. There's been a decent amount of growth, I think. 100 to a couple hundred people are reading my writing, which is just crazy for me to think that that many people would want to actually read stuff that I'm writing down. But hopefully it helps some folks, and I'd like to eventually pair up some of the readers with other financial experts that can help them in that are some of the better fee structure financial advisors or insurance agents or things like that. So hopefully I can kind of be a conduit to direct people on the right path, and they end up not making some of the mistakes that I did.
Absolutely. I think there's a few of us out there now, and the numbers are growing, and I think it's good. It just shows that the advice is starting to get out there, but it's still a small fraction of where it needs to be. So keep up the good work. I'm going to keep reading, and I encourage our listeners to keep visiting and check out your website if they haven't. Thanks to you and Kim for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you. This is wonderful.
I want to thank Tom and Kim for joining us today. I really enjoyed hearing about the successes and challenges that they face getting to financial independence with 5 children. I'm sure with their determination, they will achieve this goal sooner than they expect. What about you? Where are you in your plans for financial independence? Message me on Twitter or join the Dr. Money Matters Facebook group, and let's discuss this further. You can read Tom and Kim's blog at highincomeparents.com, or you can follow them on Twitter, and I'll have links on the show notes. More podcast episodes are coming soon, and the prior episodes are available at drmoneymatters.com and on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher. And we are currently have all our episodes now on YouTube. Of course, it's audio only, but you can find Dr. Money Matters on YouTube now. Thanks for listening, and please continue to share with your colleagues. I'm talking to you, Physician Moms Group members. And continue to leave us positive reviews on iTunes. By leaving good reviews, it helps with the rankings process and ensures that this podcast will continue to reach the appropriate audience. Also, I wanted to just give a personal note of support to the people who are listening to this show from the affected regions of Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. We're thinking of you, and hopefully things can get back to a sense of normalcy for you after these natural disasters. Another episode is coming soon. I promise you won't have to wait 6 weeks like you did for this one. Thanks for continuing to listen.